If you were walking down the street in the summer of 1844, there is this one specific question you would have heard just echoing across the country.
Oh, everywhere.
Yeah, it was shouted from debate stages. It was printed in massive, mocking newspaper headlines. It basically became a national punchline.
Right.
And that question was, who is James K. Polk?
Which is such a brutal insult when you think about it. It functioned as the ultimate political sneer.
Yeah.
A rhetorical jab from the opposing Whig Party, completely designed to highlight just how incredibly obscure the Democratic nominee was.
Yeah.
I mean, especially compared to a towering, legendary figure like Henry Clay.
Exactly. Well, today, we are going to answer that question.
Yes, we are.
Our deep dive today is pulling from a really fantastic stack of sources. We've got historical biographies, we've got some in-depth essays from the Miller Center, and meticulous primary records directly from the Tennessee Historical Society.
Great sources.
Yeah, they are. And the mission here is to explore the life, the grueling political battles, and the immense patriotic legacy of America's 11th president. We are looking at the ultimate underdog story of a mocked dark horse who, well, quietly became one of the most consequential figures in American history.
He really did.
We're going to uncover how a man of incredibly small stature, plagued by chronic illness, managed to forge this iron will that literally reshaped the map of the United States from coast to coast. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, to really understand how a president possesses the sheer undeniable grit required to transform a nation.
Right.
To push through the staggering level of resistance Polk faced, you really have to look at the trials that forged him.
The early years.
Exactly. The origin story is classic American frontier. He was born in a North Carolina log cabin in 1795.
Wow.
And his family eventually packed up their lives and moved west right across the Appalachian Mountains to the wild frontier of Tennessee.
But young James was not, your typical rugged frontiersman.
No, not at all.
He was a deeply sick kid. He suffered from chronic, absolutely debilitating urinary stones.
Right.
The pain was so intense, it left him bedridden for weeks at a time. He was entirely unable to participate in the harsh physical labor of frontier life.
And putting this in the context of early 19th century medicine is horrifying, but it's really necessary.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Because there are no modern hospitals, there are no antibiotics, and crucially, there is absolutely no anesthesia.
Right.
By the time he was 17 years old, the pain had become so unbearable that his father realized they had to take desperate, life-threatening measures.
So his father loads this agonizing 17-year-old boy into the back of a covered wagon for a harrowing, incredibly bumpy journey all the way to Kentucky. And they make this trek just to see a noted surgeon named Dr. Ephraim McDowell.
Right.
And the details of what happens next are, frankly, not for the faint of heart.
No, they really aren't. They strapped him down to a wooden table.
Good grief.
And Polk was entirely awake, wide-eyed, completely aware of what was happening.
I can't even imagine.
The surgeon took a sharp, grooved metal instrument. It's called a gorgia. And he forced it through his prostate and directly into his bladder to manually extract the stones.
Wow.
He felt every single second of it.
I try to put myself in that room, and the psychological impact of surviving something like that is staggering.
Oh, it changes you.
It's almost like you recalibrated his baseline for human suffering. Once your baseline is enduring a 19th century unanesthetized abdominal surgery, the stress of a grueling filibuster or, a bad poll.
Or a newspaper attack.
Exactly. Someone attacking you in the press, it doesn't even register on the dial. If you can survive that, what's a little political mudslinging?
Exactly. That physical trauma instilled a rigid, almost terrifying self-discipline in him.
Yeah.
The psychological pattern is so clear here. Polk approached his entire life, and certainly his politics, with the exact same grim, unyielding determination it took to simply survive that operating table.
And he didn't just survive, he really attacked his weaknesses.
He did. He transformed himself into an academic powerhouse. He attended the University of North Carolina, graduated at the top of his class, and delivered his commencement speech entirely in Latin.
Which is wild. And his rise from there is incredibly rapid. He studies law under the prominent Felix Grundy.
Right.
He starts out at the very bottom as a clerk for the Tennessee State Senate, making just $6 a day.
Yep, humble beginnings.
But he parlays that procedural knowledge into a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives where he stays for 14 years.
It is a fixture there.
He becomes so steadfast, so fiercely loyal to the policies of his mentor, Andrew Jackson, that people actually start calling him Young Hickory.
Right, as a nod to Jackson's Old Hickory. But, raw determination isn't always enough to win over the public.
True.
Polk had this relentless drive, sure, but he was completely missing the warmth and charm required to actually get people to vote for him on a large scale.
He was a bit stiff.
Famously stiff. He needed a translator, really, someone who could soften his edges for the public. And that's where his marriage becomes the most crucial strategic move of his entire life.
And it was actually Andrew Jackson who played matchmaker, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Jackson advises Polk to marry Sarah Childress. And he specifically points out her wealth, her exceptional education, and her sharp social grace.
And she becomes so much more than a typical 19th century political wife.
She really did.
He was a brilliant political partner. Because of that brutal childhood surgery we just talked about, it is highly likely Polk was left sterile.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the couple never had children, so instead, they poured all of their joint energy directly into his career.
She was basically his chief strategist.
Absolutely. She would scour local and national newspapers, clipping relevant articles to keep him constantly informed.
Right.
She edited his speeches, she managed his correspondence, and hosted the social events that Polk himself was just, too awkward to navigate successfully.
He desperately needed her strategic mind, too, because his career was about to hit a massive wall.
Oh, yeah.
Despite his massive success in Washington, where he actually served as Speaker of the House, Polk decides to leave Congress to run for governor of Tennessee.
Which was a risk.
Right. And he wins his first term. But then he loses his re-election bid, not once, but twice.
Devastating.
And he loses to a Whig candidate named James Lean Jimmy Jones.
Right. Lean Jimmy. He was the quintessential log cabin, a hard cider politician,
Yeah.
a total populist who played right to the crowd.
Wait, hold on. I'm having a hard time squaring this. You just painted a picture of this iron-willed, hyper-competent strategist who survived the unimaginable and rose to Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
But then you're telling me his career gets completely derailed by a guy named Lean Jimmy who basically just tells jokes on the stump. What was Polk's blind spot there?
Well, what's fascinating here is the massive distinction between governing and campaigning. Polk was an absolute master of procedure. He knew policy inside and out. But Lean Jimmy Jones didn't beat him with better policies.
You beat him with personality?
He beat him with political bushwhacking.
Yeah.
Jones used mimicry. He heckled Polk relentlessly.
Wow.
He would distort Polk's words and just make the crowds roar with laughter at him. And Polk was a serious, humorless man. He had absolutely no defense against being treated as a joke.
His career in Tennessee essentially dies right there. Everyone writes him off as a has-been.
Completely.
But this series of defeats perfectly sets the stage for the Democratic Convention of 1844.
It does.
The party is completely deadlocked over the issue of Texas annexation. They vote 8 separate times, and nobody can get a 2/3 majority.
It was a mess.
Then, on the 9th ballot, from out of nowhere, the Gallic gets compromise on this defeated former governor who happens to be a staunch expansionist. James K. Polk becomes the nominee.
And the Whigs are thrilled.
Oh, they loved it.
They think the Democrats have essentially handed them the election. That's exactly when they start chanting, "Who is James K. Polk?"
Right.
They genuinely believe their superstar candidate, the legendary Henry Clay, is going to absolutely crush this unknown, uncharismatic dark horse.
But the Whigs severely underestimated the mood of the country, and they completely underestimated the sheer willpower of James K. Polk.
Oh, big time.
Against all odds, the dark horse wins a razor-thin victory over Henry Clay. And at 49, he becomes the youngest president up to that time.
Right. And securing the presidency is where the story shifts from, a political comeback to a massive continental transformation.
Yeah.
Instead of playing it safe to secure a second term, he does something completely unorthodox that immediately changes the stakes of his entire presidency.
He promises right out of the gate to serve only one single term.
Exactly.
He essentially says, I am only staying 4 years. And he sets an impossibly ambitious 4-point agenda for those 4 years.
Let's hear them.
Number 1, reestablish an independent treasury. Number 2, reduce tariffs. Number 3, acquire the Oregon Territory. And number 4, acquire California and New Mexico.
Laying all his cards on the table like that was stunningly bold.
Oh, yeah.
It meant every single person in Washington knew exactly what he was trying to do, which usually just invites a wall of opposition.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I look at this, and I don't see a typical 19th century politician. I see a modern corporate turnaround CEO.
That's a great way to put it.
Like the country brings in this hyper-focused executive. He slaps a 4-point checklist on the boardroom table, says, I am leaving in exactly 4 years. I'm not taking a single vacation day, and just ruthlessly starts executing the plan.
And the speed at which he executed those domestic goals is incredible. Let's look at the mechanisms of that first point, the independent treasury.
Okay.
Prior to this, federal funds were often kept in politically connected private state banks.
Which sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it led to rampant speculation and corruption. Polk wanted the government to control its own cash flow, completely independent of private banks.
Right.
And he drove this through Congress, fundamentally stabilizing the government financial footing.
And then he pivots immediately to point 2, the Walker Tariff, which is a masterclass in counterintuitive economics.
It really is.
He tasked his Treasury Secretary to completely overhaul the system, slashing the tax rates on importing goods from about 32% down to 25%.
Right.
Now, you would naturally think that lowering a tax rate would decrease the government's revenue, right?
But it did the exact opposite. It functioned similar to what we'd call Laffer curve economics today.
Oh, interesting.
By lowering the penalty on trade, they stimulated a massive surge in the sheer volume of goods coming into the country.
Right. More trade overall.
Exactly. Because the volume skyrocketed, the total custom revenues drastically boosted from $30 million a year to almost $45 million.
That's a huge jump.
He secured the government's cash, stimulated the economy, and checked off boxes 1 and 2 like it was nothing.
But boxes 3 and 4, however, required dealing with deeply entrenched foreign empires. You can't just pass a bill to acquire half a continent.
No, you can't. But that economic speed and ruthlessness, it applied directly to his foreign policy too.
Oh.
Take Oregon. During the campaign, his supporters rallied around the incredibly aggressive slogan, 54 degrees, 40 minutes, or fight.
Etchy.
Yeah, they were demanding the entire Oregon Territory from the British all the way up into what is now Canada.
Wait, how do you bluff the British Empire without actually triggering a catastrophic war?
You leverage their global distractions and you threaten a two-front war. Polk looks the British right in the eye and implies he's perfectly willing to go to war over this rugged northwestern land.
Just a massive stare down.
Right. And the British didn't want a war in North America. But behind closed doors, having established that aggressive posture, Polk shrewdly negotiates a reasonable compromise at the 49th parallel.
Wow.
He secures what is now Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. He absolutely locked down the Pacific Northwest for the United States without firing a single shot.
And that diplomatic victory speaks directly to his legendary work ethic. He routinely worked 12-hour days. He literally claimed to be the hardest working man in the country.
And he probably was.
And this wasn't just blind ambition. It was driven by a deep patriotic conviction that the nation must fulfill its manifest destiny. He genuinely believed the United States was meant to stretch unbroken from the Atlantic to the Pacific.
But achieving that grand vision required the final and really the most difficult box on the CEO's checklist, acquiring California and the Southwest.
Right.
Getting Oregon was a masterful diplomatic maneuver, sure, but extracting that much territory from Mexico, that was going to require military action. And the way Polk handled this crisis forever altered the power of the American presidency.
Texas had been annexed in 1845, just as Polk was coming into office. But there was a bitter, highly volatile border dispute.
Yes.
Mexico claimed the border was the Nueces River. The United States, guided by Polk, claimed the border was much further south at the Rio Grande.
And Polk didn't wait for diplomats to sort it out. He pushes the pieces on the board to force the issue. He sends General Zachary Taylor and his troops right down to the Rio Grande.
Right into the hornet's nest.
Planting the American military directly into the disputed zone, it's a massive provocation designed to spark a reaction.
Predictably, Mexican forces cross the river and attack. 16 American soldiers are killed.
Yeah.
Polk immediately goes to Congress and delivers a fiery, carefully prepared speech declaring American blood has been shed upon American soil.
And it worked.
Congress overwhelmingly declares war.
And this raises an important question about the evolution of executive power. Polk didn't break the Constitution, but he discovered its latent powers.
What do you mean?
Well, prior presidents tiptoed around the commander-in-chief clause. They deferred heavily to Congress. Polk realized that as the chief executive, he could single-handedly position troops to provoke a conflict, forcing Congress's hand.
Right.
He realized he could shape the military strategy to fight it, and he could unilaterally define the exact terms of the peace.
I mean, put yourself in the shoes of an American citizen watching this unfold in the 1840s. You are watching the president take unprecedented, almost unilateral control of the
It
military.
was shocking to a lot of people.
Guys like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were absolutely terrified of looking like monarchs, and here is Polk just making a war happen through troop placement.
He took absolute control of the strategy. He decided to mimic the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés with a direct, audacious overland march right into the heart of the country, onto Mexico City itself.
Wow.
But what is truly unique and almost bizarre is how he handles the peace process.
Yeah, he sent a guy named Nicholas Trist, who was the chief clerk of the State Department, right along with the invading army. Imagine being a soldier marching into enemy territory, getting shot at, and right next to you is a bilingual Washington bureaucrat carrying a pre-written peace treaty in his saddlebags.
It was a highly irregular protocol, but I mean, it worked.
It did.
Trist negotiates the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, ending the war. The U.S. pays $15 million and in return secures 1.2 million square miles of land.
That is just incomprehensible scale.
That land includes modern-day California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. Mexico's size was cut in half, and the United States grew by a third.
We do have to pause here, though, and look at the broader consequences, because this massive acquisition was fiercely debated.
It was deeply controversial.
The Whig opposition was furious. A young congressman named Abraham Lincoln famously introduced the spot resolutions, basically demanding Polk show Congress the exact spot where American blood was shed,
Right.
implying the initial skirmish wasn't actually on American soil at all. And later in life, Ulysses S. Grant called it a deeply unjust war.
And more consequentially, we have to acknowledge the immediate fallout of this massive land grab. These vast new territories instantly inflamed the simmering sectional tensions over slavery.
That's the real turning point.
Yeah, you had legislative proposals like the Wilmot Proviso, a highly controversial amendment that attempted to legally ban slavery in any territory acquired from Mexico.
Wow.
It didn't pass, but the bitter, violent debates surrounding it essentially lit the match for the Civil War.
So you have this incredible duality to Polk's legacy. You have critics who point to the immense human cost and the political instability that immediately followed the Mexican-American War.
Yes.
But simultaneously, from a patriotic viewpoint, you have a monumental world historical achievement. He took a vulnerable republic and permanently secured its status as a transcontinental superpower.
Both of those realities exist side by side. He accomplished exactly what he set out to do on that 4-point checklist.
He really did.
But the physical toll of carrying the weight of a rapidly expanding nation was ultimate.
So what does this all mean? Well, true to his word, James K. Polk walked away. He left office after one term in March 1849.
And he was completely physically exhausted by the relentless grind of the presidency.
He traveled back home to Tennessee, and just 103 days later, his weakened body succumbed to cholera. He died at the age of 53.
It's a profound, tragic irony. As he lay dying in Tennessee, thousands and thousands of Americans were frantically rushing into the very territory he'd just acquired, searching for their fortunes in the California gold rush. He literally worked himself into the grave to buy them that land.
He fundamentally transformed the United States from an uncertain republic on the edge of a continent into a continental giant.
It leaves you with a lingering, almost haunting question to mull over.
What's that?
James K. Polk achieved a lifetime of world-changing goals in just 4 years, but the sheer stress of it literally cost him his life and undeniably set the stage for the bloodiest conflict in American history.
Yeah.
If you could guarantee the complete, unmitigated success of your greatest, most ambitious life's work, but you knew the stress of it would kill you the exact moment you finish, would you still do it?